Joe is in Japan this week, so we're going to try something a little different. I'm going to tell you how I got a prediction wrong, how I did some further research to figure out how to improve my view, how I went into some dark places, and then how I got out of it. Last month, on October 2nd, I predicted that the government shutdown would be over in about 2 to 3 weeks. But then weeks 2 and 3 came and went, and the government was still shut down. And I was wrong. So to improve my understanding, I picked up a book that had been on my reading list. I read Original Sin by CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios's Alex Thompson. The book demonstrated, among other things, the power the presidential staff has over our policy. Now, super interesting insight into how information moves in politics, but it didn't really help me understand the shutdown. But it did kick me down a rabbit hole. Now, the next book was by Joe Manchin. He's a former Democratic senator from West Virginia, and holy shit, what an eye-opener that was. The whole thing is worth a read, but there are 3 stories in there that stood out. The first story happened in 2014, and the topic was immigration reform. The Speaker of the House at the time was John Boehner. Manchin, a Democrat, was working with Republicans to pass a meaningful bipartisan bill on immigration. But Boehner refused to put the bill on the floor for political reasons. At the time, Republicans were losing seats to Tea Party candidates, if you remember. Specifically, Eric Cantor from Virginia lost to David Brat. Brat beat the Republican by pounding the immigration issue. Boehner and the Republicans got scared, and for political considerations, good legislative governance was shelved until after the elections. Another example Manchin mentioned was in 2022, this time on abortion. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, Manchin, with support from Republican Senators Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, proposed the Reproductive Freedom for All Act, which would have codified Roe v. Wade into law. Instead, the Democrats pushed for the Women's Health Protection Act, which, according to Manchin, went far above Roe v. Wade and was designed to fail so that they could make it a midterm issue. Again, good governance was put in the back seat in exchange for theater. Manchin wrote, quote, "But much of what happens in Washington is deliberate theater, actions and votes intended to send messages instead of improve or protect lives. I have nothing against theater, but theater that replaces real action is unconscionable." A third story was the filibuster fight in the 117th Congress. So this was 2021 to 2023. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, wanted to change the Senate rule such that they only needed a majority 51 votes and not 60 to pass legislation. At the time, the Senate was 50-50, and the VP, Kamala Harris, could break the tie. Long story short, 2 Democratic senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and all 50 Republicans voted against the change in the rule. So thank goodness for Joe and Kyrsten. So in the book about this, Manchin wrote the following. It's worth quoting a few paragraphs. He wrote, quote, "Schumer wasn't interested in debate or persuasion. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted a vote he could weaponize, a moment he could broadcast to the radical left to prove his loyalty. This wasn't about governing or principle. It was about power. He wanted to paint those of us defending the filibuster as obstructionists, as villains, not because he genuinely believed eliminating it was the right thing to do, but because maintaining control of the Senate was his only priority. To him, this vote wasn't about the long-term health of the Senate or the country. It was about securing 51 votes, controlling the majority, and setting the agenda. Schumer being majority leader was more important than anything else. If killing the filibuster guaranteed his grip on power in the next Congress, so be it. The power that once rested in committees and with committee chairs, where real debate and policymaking took place, has all but vanished. Now everything flows through the majority leader's office, consolidating control and sidelining the very process that was designed to ensure thoughtful, bipartisan legislation. Now with this perspective, Boehner on immigration, the Reproductive Freedom for All Act, and Chuck Schumer's filibuster fight, I took another look at my understanding of the government shutdown. There were factors that were maybe obvious to some, but new to me, that I did not weigh properly. First, it's an election year. Second, shutdowns hurt the party in power. Third, propaganda is very effective. So here's the calculation. Shut down the government by voting against reopening it. Blame Republicans. Propaganda the people into thinking that because Republicans control the trifecta, that's the Senate, House, and presidency, Republicans could open the government, even though they can't. Then add more blue seats in the election, then reopen. I now think that the government shutdown will end after the midterm elections on November 5th. The Dems and Reps' number one priority is to their capital P party, not to the lowercase p people. Now, I was cynical before, but now I'm super cynical. Most normal people probably are disengaged from politics because most people are not masochists. This podcast, for instance, is not meant to be political. And even despite what I just said, I still consider that it is not. I view myself strictly as an outsider looking in, trying to understand what is going on. But when I thought about it, isn't that messed up? To view myself as an outsider to my own government? I avoid talking about politics at work, with family, even with friends, because it is so toxic. And then I realized that's by design. They say participate. They say get out and vote. But what they mean, I think, is shut up and vote for us. They are happy that it is toxic. Joe Manchin also pointed out that the most extreme 10% of the country, those that vote in the primaries and are the most politically engaged, those are the ones who choose the candidates. They shortlist the options, essentially, for the other 80% of the country. This is absolutely by design. This soft disenfranchisement of the middle 80% is accomplished with 4 key design features of the system. 1, gerrymandering. 2, closed primaries. 3, fundraising laws. 4, no term limits for Congress. I say soft disenfranchisement because, although I can vote, moderate views are not well represented in practice. They can't balance a budget, for goodness sakes. That's reading and writing. That's basic stuff. Blocking and tackling. It's a total bummer to watch and participate in. So, I fantasized a little bit about a third political party, representing the moderate majority. If it were up to me, I'd have 3 objectives. Unshackle ourselves from the duopolies and free us from two-party rule. Unshackle ourselves from the debt and free us from $1 trillion weight we pay on interest, holding us back. And then I'd say, release the sunlight. Uncomfortable transparency. Take all meetings live in public. The representative's boss, the American people, should be CC'd on emails. So what color would it be? Well, red and blue are already taken, so you just got to go with white. And the name, what do you think? Unshackled? The Sunlight Party? TBD. Anyways, wanted to get that off my chest. Thanks for listening.